this series of talking to experts who have managed to make critical decisions whilst in isolation. Thanks enormously to Giles Warburton, who introduced me to this new legend in our lives, which is Mark Wood. Giles has been doing a really interesting series, and once he showed me the content, I was kind of desperate to reach out to Mark and ask him to do this for us. For those of you who don't know Mark, he's a world-class mountain explorer. He's chair of the Explorers Club GB and Ireland. He's a lifesaver, humble, but obviously hard as nails. He didn't want me to say any of that. So Mark, can I, some of the things that we're kind of interested in that's hard for us at the moment is being locked up. We're very much people. You've done some incredible things. I think the format would be great if you could give us some examples of the things that you've done and how you made those decisions and how you achieved what you've achieved. I'll ask you a few more questions to make it, bring it back into relevance for the people that are in recruitment and not that it won't be relevant, but make it more appropriate for that. And then we'll do some Q&A at the end, and I'll ask everyone just to come off mute, ask a question. Mark keeps freezing, which is ironic because he didn't freeze every time he climbed Everest, but right now he seems to be freezing. Can I also say you look very handsome in that picture? This whole David Beckham thing going on in that picture behind you.
But I don't look handsome here, eh? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't want to tell you, but you know what? Mark, you're a brilliant fellow. Can I pass over to you? Because I've heard some of the things that you've done, and it's phenomenal. And I think some of the guys would be really motivated to see what is possible for that people can do. So this little bit of isolation for us is nothing compared to what the human mind and body can do.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. This situation we're in is tough, and make no bones about it. People compare it to my expeditions, but you know, everybody is different. Everybody deals with stress, with how to get through the daily routine in different ways. And one of the ways of coping is just to be honest about who you are. A lot of people go through life with a shield up and a pretense. And in the Arctic and mountains that I work in, if you've got that arrogance or that misunderstanding of who you are, then it can actually kill you because you're not being honest, basically. So don't underestimate the moment we live through, but also take a step back sometimes and actually look at what we're living through, because it's not that. It's you can cope with it, basically. What I want to do is just give you a little bit of a background of who I am and what I've done. But rather than talk for ages about all my expeditions, I'm going to pick on just two areas. One area will be nearing the summit of Mount Everest in -45, with two of my three colleagues dying in front of me. And the second example I'm going to give is relevant to where we live, what we're doing now, which is my solo expedition across the South Pole to the South Pole itself, across Antarctica, and how I use coping mechanisms whilst operating over 50 days. So I think those two will be quite relevant to the moment. My backstory is military. When I left school, thrown into the deep end from school to wearing a uniform and carrying a gun. And what I learned from that was discipline. Discipline of the simple act of getting up, making my bed, having a wash, making sure I was fed well, which might sound stupid, but simple acts like that is a real key to how we live at the moment. If you can get into a routine and be disciplined in that sense, then a lot of things become easier in your mind. One of the biggest life is to find a routine, whether you're isolated in a prison or whether you're isolated in a city like London. If you find this frozen, presume alive, Not
Oh,
too
I can still
sure.
hear you, mate. It's still good. We can still hear you.
Am I live?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm sorry if I'm. You can still hear me. Well, my
Yeah, I can hear
apologies.
you.
I can't hear anything now.
Yeah, sorry.
Hello.
Oh, is he
Hello.
back?
Hello.
I think you're back, buddy. Yeah, you're coming back.
Yeah, I'm here. I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear
Am
you.
I live still?
Yeah, keep going. All good.
You know, we ran an education program from the summit of Everest, linking to 10,000 students worldwide. The communications there were awesome. I'm in Stratford-on-Avon at the moment, and I'm struggling to get through. So my
You're back.
apologies for that. We're all on expedition together. As long as I'm live, that's good. So my point was isolation, getting that from the army of discipline. I then went on to work for the Fire and Rescue Service. What I learned from that Fire and Rescue Service was how to deal with very stressful situations, but without emotion. So if you take emotion out of it, then you can be more effective with your training, the equipment, the people around you, and your focus in it at that stressful situation. And all the emotion comes later on. That's why people coming back from wars and that suffer and things like that. But the idea of a debrief afterwards is so important, not only to learnings, but also to mental health. And that's where the honesty kicks in as well. And you'll hear me saying honesty all the way through this, because it is a big thing with me. And then after that, I then decided to do something different. And I went on an expedition, which is a very quick skip. How did I do that? I was just looking for a little bit more excitement in my life. And I went on an expedition in high Arctic Canada. And the long and short is I got hooked. And that was 20 years ago. And to date, I've done over 35 major expeditions in the Canadian high Arctic, Antarctica, the Himalayas, Alaska, running dog teams. We've progressed from, I think in the early days, I did expeditions because it was an ego-driven thing for me. I wanted to test myself physically and mentally. But over those years of dedication to the environment and to education, I began to realize how important the planet was to our own existence. Now, I'm a realist, and you know my background already. And actually, if I was telling you this story 8 weeks ago, some of you might have gone, yeah, he's going on about the environment. But actually, we're living through times where we understand the importance of the environment and the importance of basically harnessing heat and wind for our energy sources. And look how quickly that, you know, through not using planes and transport, that the earth is kind of taken a breath and started to rebuild a little bit. So this is a learning process for us as we're moving forward. Whether we actually learn en masse afterwards or the government learn afterwards is another thing. But there you go. It's given us a glimpse of what we can get into, basically. So I got into expeditions, and one of the main factors of what I was doing was how it inspired me on a very personal level. What I was seeing, who people I was meeting, how it was making me feel, how it was developing me as a person. So what I thought would be a good idea was to run education programs. And in the very beginning, I did 20 young people from my old school in Coventry. I linked with them from the Northwest Passage on a 4-week expedition, just using a sat phone, a couple of speakers, linked to them every other day, had a chat, questions, blah, blah, blah. 20 years later, on Everest last year, we linked to 1.2 million students worldwide. So that's where the audience has increased through using social media and great companies like Lonely Planet and Skype, and now the International Scouting Movement. A vast audience. But there lies a problem, because these children are from all over the planet and they live in different areas. So how can I give an extreme lesson with a backdrop of Mount Everest or the ice and preach or teach these young people things, because they all live different lives? So I cover 4 things, and I know I'm speaking to an adult audience here, but this will resonate with you because it's what I stick by as well. What I try and get children to do is respect themselves, because I think the first element of all this is if you have respect for yourself and understand yourself, everything comes from here. And you can be a good person. If you run businesses and you have a new person come in, if they don't know much, that's one thing. But if they're good people and seem to fit in within a team, then you can develop them quite well. So being respectful, being a good person is the first thing. Secondly, to have an equal respect for the environment, and not the whole planet, but just your own local village, city, community, company, and look at ways that you can improve your system, because it is money saving at the end of the day, which is great for companies. Thirdly, it's about thinking differently about life. And I think companies need to do that at the moment. And we're doing it through this medium here. You know, we are going to drop out of this and go, hang on a minute, we could actually work this in a better way. So a lot of people look at life like this. I look at life like that, slightly off key. And I see opportunities, anything that comes towards me that doesn't work, you could perceive that as a negative, but I actually see it as a way of really creating space, creativity, or maybe even just changing direction. So I never see negativity in things. It's always opportunities or different ways of doing things. And then the fourth element is something that I struggle with. A 53-year-old man struggles with the point of stepping back and having fun. You know, I'm focused so much on my exploration and pushing this out to wider audiences that I struggle with that. I was going to mention the two elements on Everest and the South Pole. So I'll do this, and then I'll finish by just saying what I'm doing next year. And then we can turn back to questions if you like. So on Everest in 2013, I was part of a 4-person team that I created. I had 10,000 students following me. I've been on the mountain for 72 days. We reached Camp 4, which is just below 8,000 meters. And I could see the summit of Everest on the night of the 19th of May, 2013. I stepped out of my tent at 8:30 in the evening, minus 45. So pretty horrible stuff. Your freezers are minus 18. That gives you a perspective. With a side wind of 50 miles an hour, it was coming in from the side. I was hooked to a safety line. We started to do the ascent, full oxygen. At the summit, I was going to do a live call to the 10,000 students, plus the bosses of Microsoft and Skype. So no pressure. I got to within 200 meters of the summit, and the lead guide fell flat into the mountain like a sack of potatoes. And I went up to him and pulled him up to me and looked at his eyes, and they were all over the place and he couldn't really speak. And I turned back to the doctor who was behind me and I said, he's dying. And the doctor said to me, my feet are frozen, I need to head down the mountain. So then I looked down for the 4th member who's abseiling into the dark back to Camp 4. And then I realized I was left alone with 2 people dying, with a program in front of me from the summit. I looked up, I could see the head torches of the climbers reaching the summit of Everest as well. I was that close. And I needed to make a decision. Now, in normal circumstances, I can sit in front of you and give you an hour's talk on decision making. Okay, but decision making comes in 2 formats. One, you have time to chat to others, bring in other people, think through your decisions, and then make a decision. The other side is what I was in. You've got to make a decision based on experience and instinct. The worst thing you can do is not make a decision, and that's life-threatening. So at that point, I decided to just abort the expedition. Now, I've done some tough things in my life. But we carried that guy about 150 meters down the mountain. He started to find his feet. We got him to Camp 4. We kept him alive that evening. And over 3 days, we moved him back to base camp down at 5,300 meters. We then walked him back to his village. Everybody on that expedition survived. They all lived, and we've been climbing ever since. My worry was, what would those 10,000 students think of? Because they'd been following me for about two months. And they learned more about that one act than they would have done about some random guy waving a flag at the summit of a mountain. And that really is a lesson on the success of an expedition. Because success, some people think, is standing at the North Pole or on Everest. It's not. It's doing this. It's giving talks to people, honest accounts of what happened. And that's been passed down from people like Neil Armstrong, Amundsen, Scott, Shackleton, Peary, all the great explorers of the past, all one thing in common: storytellers. And it's important to do that with honesty. There's that word again. The final story is, and I'll make it brief, I planned 3 years for an expedition to the South Pole. A 50-day expedition followed by a North Pole solo expedition. I was laughed at within the explorer community because I'm a nobody. None of you guys have heard of me. I never worked on profile. I've worked on expeditions and always got my hands dirty. The reality of the expedition was when the plane left me on the west coast of Antarctica, and I was standing alone with Antarctica in front of me, 700 miles, statute miles of ice. I'm a pretty smart guy. You can see that. You can see that on your screen. And I took an iPod with me so I could listen to some music. I don't generally do that when I'm walking my dogs, but you need stimulation with a white void around you. I lost that on the 4th day of the expedition. So I had nothing to think of. Now let's bring this into this situation. This is where you need to really step back. And I think I'm going to use this situation we're in now to give you a great idea of how to cope. Everybody will feel stressed, no matter of this cause. If you go to your normal work each day, within a 10-day period, you will feel stressed and overwhelmed with the situation for no reason at all. It's just who we are as human beings. But when you have something like this, where you're isolated or you're standing in Antarctica, everything is exacerbated and everything is about you. So when something happens, you feel weakened, you feel you can't do stuff. The thing to do, that's just a normal thing. It's a normal happening. So first of all, don't beat yourself up, all right? Secondly, step back from the situation. Move away from this whole thought pattern. Take the dog a walk, stand up the garden, speak to somebody else if that's your thing, and readdress what is happening, because you will find that it's not as bad as you think it is. Even the worst case scenarios, which you think can be dealt with, it's just what we call life. So just step back, readdress, and then you can move forward with a better mindset on you. And that's what I did. I moved forward and did the simplistic thing of putting one foot in front of the other, and eventually I reached the South Pole. That's the quick version, by the way. A lot happened on that trip. And finally, next year. It may be next year, maybe the year after. Let's see how the confidence of business goes. Because what I do is all about investment. Invest in my expeditions, and it will, I can carry a brand through these extreme areas. For the last 3 years, I've been working on a documentary with 2 big production companies. One of them is Tom Hardy's company in London. The other one is Diamond Docs in LA, who did Icarus and other great films. They've been filming me in Alaska and Africa, the Himalayas, and North Pole. And it's all about modern day exploration and how explorers face these new challenges of climate change. The film is called Solo 100, and the main bulk of the film is next year. And it's me doing a 100-day cross into the Arctic on my own. 100 days with no outside support, taking all of my equipment with me. And along the way, I'll be introducing 100 films. So the International Scouting Movement are collating 100 films from students around the world to say who they are, where they're from, so you get that human connection, their issues with climate change, and most importantly, their pledge towards climate action. So 100 films will be collated over that 100-day expedition, and it's called Solo 100. I've just exhausted myself, so I'm going to pass it back to you guys if you want to interrogate me now.
Can I say, I knew you were good. Oh my God. And it's refreshing, it's unique, it's different, it's really classy how you come across. And you're going to be a massive hero to us right now. And we're going to engage with you a lot, by the way, because it's stories like that that really impassion people like me. So thank you very much. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And I do love the 4 stories for children. Not far away from what I do for myself. I just reorder them because I start with fun and work to the other stuff. And so I absolutely love that. I've got a couple of questions, and now I was really, because actually you answered all of my questions. I was after some tips about mental well-being, so we got both of those, which is fantastic. I was looking about how you did some days you just not fancy doing it. You know, there's some days it's just you're just not going to have a good day, and you have to step back. And I totally get that. So, I've got only one question, in truth. You've aligned yourself to some of the biggest, sexiest brands, not companies, brands in the world. Is it Skype? Is it Google? The pair of them. You're going to speak to the CEO. What do you think, or maybe you know factually, did the CEOs of those businesses see themselves? What did they get? What did they think they were going to get by aligning to your journey, to an expedition, to climbing a mountain? Because it feels, for me, it's that's what a business is. Was it the climate change piece, or was it actually, I want to put my brand on this man and let him take me to the top of a mountain? What do you think it was, or know what it was?
Everybody who's watching this will get this. What I'm about to say, they will go, yeah, that's what it is, especially if you're in management. Yeah. The biggest thing that I look for is personality. All right. You can build on people. I've said that already in the talk. If I walked into the boss of Skype or Microsoft and was an annoying idiot, they wouldn't have invested in me. So I need to come across as that. Humble is a strange word. It's been used too much with me, because I am humble, but I've got a great brand, and we do great things for education and for business. So I'm beginning to think that I need to push that out. But I say it in a way that I don't expect. I just want them to understand. And if they want to get involved, they can. And I think it would benefit them. So it is about being honest, being yourself, and being a good person. Geez, I've said that right at the start. It's weird, isn't it? But then you've got to walk in. You get one hit with these guys. So you've got to go in prepared. So we design a website, we get a deck together. You guys know all about this. We go in presentable. Luckily, I'm an explorer, so I can go in rough gear like this. Don't have to wear a suit. Yes. And I sit in front of these guys and I tell them what I'm doing. I don't ask them for help. I tell them what I'm doing, and I pinpoint opportunities. And if it becomes to the point where I think they just need to get involved, and that's how I feel. This is extraordinary. I'm ticking, it's horrible to say this, but I am ticking every single box: education, environmental, teamwork, business, leadership, every box that we're ticking. And we haven't gone to school to learn this. We haven't gone into a university or watched other speakers talking about it. We've gone and made mistakes in the field. We've got our hands dirty. We've made those mistakes, and we've come back and learned from them. So this is aggressive learning that we're bringing into the workplace. So And the other thing that they can get from it is obviously brand association and whatever whatever they require from it. But that's a distant conversation. It's an initial reaction that you want.
Not so humble. I tick every box. I love you. Can I open this up to everyone? Right. So I'm going to mute myself. If you want to ask a question, unmute yourself and then just ping on.
I'm just watching your videos as you're speaking as well on your. Looks absolutely fantastic. What was that?
That was in Tesco's. that was the solo expedition across Antarctica. So if you look in, can you show me the picture again? Yeah, okay. So if you look in the screen in my goggles, so if you take a look in my goggles, you can see the camera. So that just proves it's solo. And around me is just 360 of what you can see in the background. I mean, it's a privilege to be so isolated. If that's a quote that you want.
When you're in such isolation, how do you keep focused rather than drifting off in tangents and think that's got to be the
it's a very different thing from what we're doing now. So it might not actually parallel our lives at the moment. But when I lost that iPod, I didn't really say it in the talk because you can say too much. But I broke down on day 5 and thought, I can't do this. I sat in my tent for 36 hours. I was crying. I was in bits. I thought, shit, I can't do this, excuse my language. But my friend who lives in the UK, who's been on expeditions, he taught me back on my feet, but still you need that physical presence to push yourself forward. And I was finding it so hard. I started to move, and that day I covered 3,000 ski steps, but counted them. And that is a nightmare. And I stood in the ground and I put my ski sticks in the ground and I just went, oh, I can't do this. And then I looked up and I closed my eyes and I thought, where do I want to be at this moment in time? And I drifted my mind to a place in Norfolk where I walk my dogs near Wells Next to Sea, along the beaches, through the pine forests. And in my mind, I started to walk my dogs and I started to ski. And I kept that image and that sort of motion of my dreamscape for about 2 hours. And then I covered 6 nautical miles. And that's how I reached the South Pole. Every now and again, I'd snap into a dreamscape of giving a talk, redecorating my house, which never got done, and guiding teams in the Himalayas. So just drifting my mind somewhere else. And this is a really good coping mechanism for people who are captured in wars, people who are imprisoned. I wouldn't recommend it in business if you're in a business meeting, but, do you know what I mean? The mind is a remarkable tool where you can just step back, readjust, and then move forward with a little bit more confidence. So,
can I ask a question?
They actually say if you're ever down and depressed and you usually find your head down, thinking about stuff and looking to the floor, they actually say that your brain finds it weird to start looking upwards because it's a different thought process where you look up and start thinking. Your head should be backwards. So if you ever find yourself in a sort of state and depressed or angst about something, if you actually look up, it changes the chemical balance within your brain.
I didn't know that. Yeah, it makes sense. When there's chaos, it's good to walk away.
When you climb mountains, do you look up or down?
We do both.
I know. Can I ask a question about goal setting? So because it's really interesting. So as businesses at this moment in time, so I'm someone who talks about KPIs and drivers and having some specifics, especially to help people get through tough times. And it's, when everything goes wrong, you go run back to mama and you just work on the basics and good things will happen. Whereas if I was climbing a mountain, I might be setting myself a goal, just I need to get to there. And I don't care how I do it, I need to get to there. And then you talk about taking steps. how did you set a goal every day, and did you change your goal setting strategy as you went through the process?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that, but I'll do it in a business perspective because that's why these guys are here to listen to that. There's a thing that I talk about, which is leading from the back rather than leading from the front, as most people say. Leading from the back in rescue terms is command and control, which is a very fancy way of saying it, but it's a way of sort of, if you're guiding a team, whether it's business or on expedition, you've got the skills, you're very, very good at being a leader. But what you're not good at is being creative or other things, because that's why you've got the team there. They're the creative ones. They're the good on computers and doing whatever, you know, they're in front of you. You're just really good at seeing the end goal, getting to the summit or getting to that final, you know, project that you're aiming for. So you can see that. But what you're also good at as a leader, as a business leader, is looking at the pitfalls along the way, and then also stepping into your team and gradually moving them forward, okay, but not micromanaging them. Does that make sense? It's kind of allowed.
Yeah.
What's good about that is that individual who's been brought in to work on a certain thing is able to be creative, able to use their full skill sets in pushing this forward. They might actually see things that you don't see because they're very good at this. But what links all this together is very good communication. And that's a massive part of business, is communicating as a team and moving it forward. And what you get by using those scenarios is a better, a more, I don't want to say more fun team, but you get a better, there's a better motivation, a happier team. I couldn't think of the words, but a happier team is a good way of putting it, you know. And that's great. A company is only as good as its workforce, in my eyes. You can have the best product in the world, but if they can't be asked to move that forward, then you're stumbling all the way.
You stopped yourself then, didn't you?
But I did still use the swear word. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. You're allowed in this product. It's absolutely fine.
Okay. But you know what I mean. And I think you actually put it right as well. You have an end goal, but you don't focus on that end goal all the time, because you'll destroy yourself, because it's too far away. The South Pole was 700 miles away. If I thought about that every minute of the day, I would never do the expedition. So what I've got to focus on is that hour, that day, and so on. Slightly different in the business world, but you get that sense of what I'm talking about.
That's brilliant.
Mark,
anybody else?
Yeah, Mark, Richard Prothero here. Just one thing, obviously, with these 100 days of isolation where you're doing some amazing things and going through that, how do you then, which is probably the case that a lot of us will be in the next month, hopefully, is how do you reacclimatize, go from complete isolation, then back into normal life? How do you find that, and how do you have any tips of coping with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually after an expedition, I feel very zen and very sort of, you know, you learn so much about yourself. I'm not a hippie or anything. I'm pretty realistic about things. Nothing wrong with hippies. But I feel pretty zen about things, and moving back into life, it actually helps me with my business, with my family, everything like that. It really helps me to focus more. So I think this is a time when people should really readdress who they are, what they want to do, how they want to move forward, you know, and companies should do that. It's a great time where you're not having to drive to places and have meetings and all your time is consumed in movement and that. You can actually utilize that time to go, well, actually, we've got a blank piece of paper here. How do we move forward? And let's think completely radically about this, because we're not doing it yet. We're just coming up with ideas. So I think I'd use this moment in time to start afresh, have a fresh approach to the brand. The good thing about what's happening is everybody is in the same boat. Everybody can't really move forward with their businesses at the moment. I know there's massive, you know, food companies are doing well, etc. But generally, the businesses are like, we're all in the same boat. So when it comes round to working again, the government want to make sure the economy gets better, and they'll want companies to start working again. So you've got that backing by the government, which is great. So it just is a case of reassessing now, taking that moment to reassess and see how you move forward. And I think that's quite exciting, you know. It's an exciting time to live in. Before this happened, I used to preach, but people would say, how do we cope with climate change? Because no one's going to stop driving. No one's going to do this. And I said, what we need to do in computer terms is pull the plug out of the human race, give it a minute, and then plug it back in again. And let's have a rethink. And then a few weeks later, bang, we're in it. We're pulling that plug out. So I think it's a good time.
Thanks, that's good.
Anybody else?
Go on then. I'll ask a question if that's all right. Mark, I've got a lot of respect for you. I went to Everest myself, but unfortunately got acute mountain sickness just before base camp, so it's horrific. That was about 17,000 feet up. But look, I was curious to know what it was like going into the death zone, and maybe just explaining what that was like. And I'm curious how your mind kept you going through it, because I know that's obviously life and death. You know, can you share that a little bit?
The best, I've worked with the Scouts a lot, so the best slogan I've ever heard isn't "Who dares wins" or something like that. Respect to them, but it's "Be prepared." So "Be prepared" is a great thing to use in business, in self. You know, getting up in the morning, whatever it might be prepared. And every day of that 72-day approach to Everest, I thought about the last day of going up to the summit, the last movement up. So everything I did up to that point was in preparation, being prepared for that last moment, which meant that I moved slow. Now, you know this because you've been up to a height, by the way, and big respect for that. Don't knock yourself. A lot of people don't do it, okay? But moving slow, eating the right food, keeping your heart rate at a certain level, not getting sort of being like a Tigger, as I say, jumping around, just keeping really sort of in the moment, ego down, etc. is everything I did from Kathmandu, all the way through the mountains, up to base camp, breathing, relaxing, etc. I did that all the way through Camp 1, 2, 3, back down, Camp 1, 2, 3, 4, back down, etc. Because when you move into the death zone, it's a different world. Just to explain to people that don't know, it's about 7,200, 7,500 meters up, which is about 4 miles straight up in the air, if you like. And you've got 30% oxygen going into your body. So if you're not prepared, if you're not relaxed, then the whole thing can take over. You can get anxiety from just the pressure of being up there in that area. The pressure of being up there anyway, the actual pressure can give you blood from your ears and your nose and your eyes and stuff like that, but it doesn't generally happen, but you can feel that pressure. And where a lot of people do fail is that they move too fast. They get overawed by the situation. So just a gentle movement through. I think the advantage I had, because I'm not a mountaineer, the advantage I had was I know how to live on a long-range expedition. So I know how to do that. And I almost take the expedition word out of it and say that this is what I'm doing in this moment of time. This is my life. My existence is being on this mountain. So you take the pressure off yourself. Maybe you can relate that to business, you know. And then when you move through the death zone, every step is a thought. And then you do 6 steps and you think, my God, this is horrendous. And then you look up and everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's moving slowly. Everybody's fighting their own mental battles of pushing their way through. And then you've got to gently go through. But the hardest part of it is, and I'm just going to bring this right back to this moment in time, the hardest part of a mountain is actually a descent. So when you descend from the mountain, that's when you get injuries, you get people messing up because they've probably been to the summit and they're on a high now and they think, oh, the expedition's over with. So when they come down, that's where you see your accidents. When a patrol goes out in the military, they get ambushed on the way back generally because they're thinking of the food and the rest and their mind switching off from that moment. When we're coming, and I thought about this the other day, and it's the first time I've sort of said this analogy out loud. So why not do it to like 60 people? When this moment in time, we can see a slight sort of light at the end of the tunnel, and we're making our way out of the tunnel itself. And my hope is that the government don't overrush this and don't get pressurized by companies saying, go back to work, because we've contained this quite well. The aftermath of the interrogation will be interesting, but at the moment the government are doing quite well. So let's get out of this slowly. Don't worry about business. Don't worry about all that. Worry about lives. That's important. That's what I focused on in Everest, a life, rather than 10,000 kids following my so-called expedition. And get out at the other end, and then we make good.
How did you prepare yourself mentally? Yeah. How did you prepare? So be prepared. How did you be prepared mentally to take on a challenge?
This challenge next year is I would say is the toughest polar challenge anybody can take on. It's very controversial, that statement. There's a lot of things that people can do. Maybe I reduce that and say it's the biggest challenge of my life. 100 days is ridiculous to do, right? Setting up a company, employing 2,000 people for a product is a ridiculous thing to do, okay? But if you've got the experience and you know what you're getting into, that's the starting point. If you know the dangers and the pitfalls and the what ifs of what you're getting into, then you've got a realistic sort of way in, if you like. So I know what's going to happen out there. So it's just about me preparing my mind. Even now, I'm probably a year away, and I would say in the current climate, maybe 2 years away, okay? But I'm still thinking about me stepping off that Russian helicopter and onto that ice and then buggering off. I know that's going to happen. And I know how fearful, how frightened, how sort of overwhelmed I'm going to be at that situation. But my mind is already training for that moment.
Any questions from anybody else? Because I've got loads.
Yeah, I just have one around your commitment, I suppose, to your sponsors or your team or what you say. Because I suppose a lot of us are just treading through treacle at the moment. And how much of reaching your end goal is just your personal drive and ambition versus having that sort of sense of accountability that you need to deliver for what you said or your sponsors?
Yeah, I mean, it's good. I mean, I'm only as good as my sponsors, put it that way. So they're really important to me, sponsors and any organization that supports the actual mechanics of what I do. So there is a personal drive in there. Of course there is, because I need that desire and passion within me to see this through. The hardest part of this expedition is way before I go out on ice. It's gathering it all together. And even after the expedition, the most important thing is going straight back to the sponsors and saying thank you or doing whatever for them, because then I'll move on to greater things afterwards or different things. So all the things that I've said up to this point about being honest, communication, clarity, it all comes into play. If you were sponsoring me, if you were my sponsor, you would require that. And you require that nice, gentle relationship rather than you just giving me money and me going off and do the thing. You want to feel a part of this as well. And that's what I try and do. I try and create a relationship, not just for that expedition, but for future stuff, whatever it might be. So there's really, the percentage wise, it's more so about the sponsors because everything else is what I do, logistics and my own capabilities. Did that answer the question? I'm not too sure that it did.
Yeah, I think it did, because I think we're in similar situations where it's pretty easy for an individual to sort of step off, but that accountability of the team and making sure that you kind of deliver is I think what's probably certainly having some success in our business.
For any leaders out there, I think when you go back to work, there are going to be people looking at you like little chicks, looking at the mother hen, if you like. And it's an important time for leadership. So you need to be prepared before then. So I think leaders and co-leaders need to come together and work out a good strategy, even though it seems very simple. So even if it's just a case of people going back to work and getting on with work, there's still a moment where you need to do a reassessment for everybody in a meeting, and then individuals or whatever, and just to see how they are and how they feel about what's happened. I think it's very important to do that.
Yes.
Buddy, can we take one more question, and then I'll let you go, Mark, because this has been phenomenal, by the way.
Sure.
Oh. Anybody? Or I will.
Mark, can I ask you about fatigue and how that's affected your decision making? You know, I imagine on the expeditions you've been under pressure, you've been tired, and how that affects you, and therefore how that would translate in a business environment. What advice you'd give if you think it is an important factor to help people sort of, you know, excuse me, have a good level of energy to help their well-being?
Yeah. That's a good question, because I actually, in preparation for this, I just wrote 3 things down, I can cover cover the 2 of them quickly because it's not relevant to what you're saying. But I've written down 3 areas to survive in this, and one of them answers your question. So the first one is routine. I've said about that already. Slip into a routine. The second one is about space, which is a bit strange. But I've lived in a tent heading towards poles or whatever with 2 other guys, and we're all big guys, but we're all always aware of our own space. As soon as you put a cup onto their area, it becomes a world war. So living at home, working at home, space is really important, respecting that. And then it's about health. And I think what I do on expedition to keep my energy levels up, I realize you're talking about business as well, but the food that I take isn't food, it's fuel. And I need to calculate this. So this isn't on expedition because I'm already there then. But beforehand, I work out how many calories I have a day, which is it's generally about 6,000 to 8,000 calories I burn a day, which is like a high performance athlete. So then I need to take that in my sledge. Well, I can guarantee that nobody can do 6,000 to 8,000 calories in a weight of food. Unless you take 20 burgers with you, etc. But there's no nutrition or protein or whatever in there. So it's a real calculation of that, plus the weight of your slates, the balance, the volume, etc. all comes into play. I love that calculation, but there's a real calculation beforehand. And then it's about sustaining your energy levels as you're going along. But even if you've got it smack bang on, as I said before, during that 10 days, you will have a low. There's no reason for it. It's mental, something might happen mentally or whatever, and you'll just have a low. So that's the fatigue. But the brain is extremely good at persisting, and it will just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And it will far outlive the body in that sense as it moves forward. In business sense, you know, is that what you mean in business sense, the fatigue of how do you...
Yeah, just generally, I mean, for us all, yeah, especially during this period, I don't know if other people have noticed, but actually getting more sleep than you usually do makes a huge difference. And how you can help people in your team, you know, when things are back to normal, making sure that actually just a pretty fundamental basic thing that often gets overlooked, that people are, you know, it's important for their well-being and obviously for their performance as well.
I think I might be wrong. I'm not an expert on this. Okay, there are people who go to university to study this, and I haven't. But I think a lot of energy levels, how you feel, is all in the brain. So sitting en masse with people, as I said to the other gentleman, and giving a debrief on what's happened, and then speaking to individuals and having, it might not be you who speaks to them because they might not feel confident about speaking to you. There might be other people in the team that you can utilize. And I don't want to be sexist here, but you might have a female that wants to talk to a female, things like that. Does that make sense? So you get the right people to speak, and then it's a mental sort of thing, because people will be blocking things as well. Humans have a good way of blocking things, and the stress comes out a little bit later on. So it's a good way of just monitoring that over the next 6 months. And then, taking things seriously about health. Health is so important to how you move through the day and how you operate as a business. You see that for the people who train and that, that you perform better. So there is an emphasis on that. Whether you bring out outside help and invest in that, that might be good. It'd be good for the economy. So, yeah. I hope that answered that. I'm not too sure if it did.
It does, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just want to say one last thing before I go. Now I've got everybody. I enjoy this, and I use it as a way of learning as well. So even though I give talks, there's nothing written down. There's no script or anything. And when I deliver talks to businesses, I talk from the heart and from experience. I might make mistakes. I might say the wrong words. It doesn't matter. People see that honesty in me. And I will say that if anybody in business wants me to give a talk after this, then this is a way of me supporting my life as I move forward. And that's a very, very cheap plug. But hopefully, if you see any worth in this, then I'm happy to perform in front of your companies. Okay.
Mark, you actually just stole my thunder, because my last question to you would be, anything that we could possibly do for you, just ask, and we'll be all over it. But you beat me to the plug. You, sir, are a legend. Now, I think I know everything. Look at that. There's a lot of notes there. So thank you. I'll be plagiarizing all of that, and you'll be seeing it on LinkedIn over the next couple of weeks. Brilliant. Good luck with your next venture. If we can help you with any fundraising, just ping me a line. And I was blown away by that. You are, you're a special guy. Giles said he's the type of bloke you'd be scared of, but definitely want to go for a pint with. You'd
be scared of me. And if all the business guys are watching this, right? And what you just said to me, if we can help with any sponsorship in the future, that's in my head, I'm afraid. So all the business guys are smiling now, because they know that when you pick stuff up like that, you do then pursue it. So I will be in touch, and we can have a good chat. Okay, so no worries.
That'd be brilliant. If you can drag me all the way to a poll, that'd be amazing. Right, sir, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And we'll be in touch soon.
Okay,
peace and love. Stay safe. And yes, it's the David Beckham picture. Absolutely love it. Cheers.
Great.
See you, buddy.
Bye-bye.